The crystalline halls of the Galactic Embassy hummed with nervous energy as Ambassador Carax paced back and forth, her iridescent scales reflecting the soft blue lighting. The news had sent shockwaves through the diplomatic community. A human would be assigned as her personal guard. Her antennae twitched with anxiety as she recalled all the terrible stories about these Deathworlders. "Your Excellency," her assistant still chirped, mandibles clicking rapidly. "The human arrives in 1 standard hour. Perhaps we should review the safety protocols again." Carax's inner eyelids flickered in agreement. The Federation's decision to integrate humans into diplomatic security seemed like madness. Everyone knew humans were unstoppable killing machines, evolved on a planet with crushing gravity and lethal predators. Their endurance alone made them nightmarish. They could chase prey for days without rest, healing from injuries that would kill most species. "Have the panic buttons been installed?" Carax asked, her translator converting her melodic language into standard galactic common. "Yes, Excellency. 1 under your desk, 2 in your private chambers, and 1 in your ceremonial robe." Syl pulled up a holographic display showing the locations. "At the first sign of aggressive behavior, security will respond." The embassy's main doors slid open with a soft hiss, and Carax's heart chambers nearly seized. Standing there, at least a head taller than any of her species, was the human. But instead of the snarling beast she'd expected, she saw a female wearing the crisp uniform of the Diplomatic Security Corps. Her dark hair was neatly tied back, and she carried herself with a professional demeanor that seemed at odds with all the violent stories. "Ambassador Carax," the human said, bowing respectfully in the traditional Thrillian manner, a gesture that shocked the ambassador. "I'm Security Officer Sarah Chen. I've been assigned as your personal guard for the duration of your term here on Station Alpha." Carax's translator took a moment to process the human's words, giving her time to study this puzzling creature. Officer Chen's movements were precise but gentle, nothing like the lumbering brute she'd imagined. Even more surprising was the small potted plant the human carried. "I brought you a peace lily from Earth," Chen explained, noticing Carax's gaze. "I read that Trillians have a deep appreciation for botanical gifts. It's traditionally given as a symbol of harmony and good intentions in many Earth cultures." The ambassador's scientific curiosity began to override her fear. The human had researched her species' customs and brought a gift that aligned with their cultural values. This didn't match any of the briefings about humans being simple-minded warriors. "Thank you, Officer Chen," Carax managed to say, accepting the plant with trembling appendages. I must admit, you are not what I expected." Sarah smiled, and Carax was surprised to find the expression non-threatening. "I know there are a lot of stories about humans, Ambassador. Some true, some exaggerated. I hope during our time working together, I can show you that while we might be strong or resilient, we use those traits to protect, not harm." As Zitil nervously showed Officer Chen the security office adjacent to the ambassador's chambers, Carax found herself reevaluating everything she thought she knew about humans. Perhaps the Federation's decision wasn't so crazy after all. Still, she kept the panic button close, just in case. Little did she know, this was just the beginning of a partnership that would challenge everything the galactic community thought they knew about humanity. 2 weeks into Officer Chen's assignment, the routine at the Galactic Embassy had settled into an unexpected harmony. Carax found herself becoming increasingly fascinated by her human guard's behavior, especially during the morning security rounds. "Officer Chen," Carax called out one morning, watching as the human methodically checked each window seal. "Why do you insist on performing these checks manually when our AI systems are perfectly capable?" Sarah smiled, running her hand along another window frame. "Because, Ambassador, humans have something called intuition. Sometimes we notice things machines miss, little details that don't quite add up. We call it a gut feeling." As if proving her point, Sarah paused at the last window, her expression changing. "Like right now, this seal feels different." She pressed her palm flat against the frame, then pulled out a small device. "Ambassador, please step back." The scanner in Sarah's hand began blinking red. Carax's scales paled when she saw the readings. A microscopic breach in the Window's quantum seal, one that could have eventually led to a catastrophic failure in the embassy's life support systems. But the AI scans showed nothing. Still exclaimed, mandibles clicking rapidly in distress. "The breach was too small for standard scans," Sarah explained, already calling in the maintenance team. But the temperature difference was noticeable to human touch. Our species evolved as persistence hunters. We're pretty good at noticing small environmental changes. Carax watched in amazement as Sarah coordinated with the repair crew, her movements efficient but never threatening. How strange that the very traits that made humans feared, their hunting instincts, their physical sensitivity to their environment, were being used to protect rather than harm. Later that day, during the weekly diplomatic reception, Carax noticed another surprising aspect of her human guard. Sarah stood at her post, alertly watching the crowd, but she was also smiling, engaging in brief, pleasant conversations with passing diplomats. "Your human seems unusually social for a predator species," commented Ambassador Vix, a jellyfish-like being floating nearby. "I was led to believe they were solitary hunters." Before Carax could respond, a commotion broke out across the room. A young Pranks diplomat, known for their species' inability to process certain chemicals, had accidentally consumed a fermented beverage. The poor being was convulsing, their respiratory sacs failing. Sarah moved with shocking speed, but not toward the threat, as everyone expected. Instead, she rushed to help, pulling out an emergency medical kit that Carax hadn't even known she carried. 3 years ago, we had a similar incident on Earth with a Pranks exchange student, Sarah explained later, after the medical team had confirmed the diplomat would fully recover. Since then, all human diplomatic security officers carry universal antihistamines compatible with most species. Carax found herself sharing this story at the next council meeting, watching her fellow ambassadors' expressions of disbelief, a human using their knowledge of alien physiology to heal rather than harm. Their quick reactions to protect rather than attack. "Perhaps," Carax concluded, her scales shimmering with newfound confidence, "we have been too quick to judge humans based on their physical capabilities alone." That evening, as Carax prepared for her rest cycle, she realized something. The panic button Still had insisted she carry was still in her desk drawer, untouched and forgotten. Yet somehow she felt safer than ever. As she drifted off to sleep, she could hear Sarah's steady footsteps patrolling the corridor outside, and for the first time, the sound brought comfort rather than fear. But soon, both the ambassador and her guard would face a test that would prove whether their growing trust could withstand real danger. The attack came during the Festival of Harmonious Moons, when Station Alpha's security was stretched thin managing the influx of diplomatic visitors. Carax was preparing for her keynote speech when the station's lights flickered ominously. "Something's wrong," Sarah said, her body tensing in a way Carax had never seen before. The human's eyes darted around the room, scanning for threats that weren't yet visible. The backup generators should have kicked in immediately. Still rushed into the room, their exoskeleton clicking frantically. "Pirates. They've breached the lower levels. The Syndicate must have learned about the peace treaty drafts in your safe." Carax's scales turned pale. The treaty she'd been working on would unite 3 major systems against pirate operations. Of course, the Syndicate would try to stop it. "Ambassador," Sarah's voice was calm but firm, "we need to move. Now." She pulled out her standard-issue stunner and what looked like a small metal disc. "This is why I insisted on mapping out 7 different escape routes during my first week." The sound of plasma fire echoed through the corridors. Sarah pressed the metal disc against the wall, and a holographic map appeared, showing red dots moving through the station. "They're trying to box us in," she explained. "But they don't know about the maintenance shaft behind your office." Carax watched in amazement as Sarah pulled away a seemingly solid wall panel, revealing a narrow passage. "Humans mapped these stations centuries ago when we helped build them. We always ensure multiple escape routes, a habit from our days living in caves and needing to escape predators. But the pirates? Corax hesitated. There are at least 12 of them. Sarah smiled, but it wasn't her usual friendly expression. This was something different, what humans called a predator's grin. They think they're hunting us, but they've never dealt with a human protecting someone they're responsible for. As if to emphasize her point, heavy footsteps approached their location. Sarah quickly ushered Corax and Still into the maintenance shaft, then turned to face the door. "Stay behind me, keep quiet, and move exactly where I tell you." Humans are also excellent at moving silently when we need to. They crept through the narrow passage, Sarah leading the way with remarkable sure-footedness despite the low light. Corax could hear her steady breathing, controlled and calm even in this crisis. Twice they had to stop as pirates passed by on the other side of the walls, and each time, Sarah's body language shifted subtly, becoming completely still in a way that reminded Corax of Earth's apex predators. "The thing about humans," Sarah whispered as they carefully made their way down, "is that we're not just persistence hunters. We're also really good at turning the tables on those hunting us. It's called counter-ambush tactics." They reached a junction, and Sarah held up her hand for them to stop. She pulled out her communicator, now showing a different pattern of red dots. The pirates had split up, thinking they were chasing their quarry toward the lower levels. "They don't realize we're actually heading up," Sarah explained, a hint of satisfaction in her voice. "While they're searching the evacuation routes, we'll be securing the command center. And then," she checked her stunner charge, "then they'll learn why you never trap a human in a corner." Corax felt her fear being replaced by something else, fascination, and perhaps even excitement. The human she had once feared as a potential killer was indeed lethal, but that lethality was entirely focused on protecting her and the station. As they prepared to make their final climb to the command level, Corax realized that the most dangerous being on the station was also her greatest source of safety. But even she couldn't predict just how far Sarah would go to fulfill their duty as a protector. The command center's emergency lighting cast eerie shadows as Sarah, Corax, and Still emerged from the maintenance shaft. The room was eerily quiet, with only the soft hum of backup systems running. "Stay low," Sarah whispered, her eyes reflecting the dim red light like a nocturnal predator. She moved to the main console, her fingers flying over the controls. "First, we need to restore communications. Then we can alert Federation forces." Corax watched in amazement as Sarah interfaced with the station's systems. "I thought humans weren't good with advanced technology." "Another misconception," Sarah replied, not taking her eyes off the screen. "We might have joined the galactic community later than most, but we're quick learners, especially when it comes to creative solutions." Still's antenna suddenly twitched. Movement in the corridor. Sarah was already moving, positioning herself between the door and her charges. "Ambassador, Access Panel B7 has a hidden compartment. Get inside, both of you. No arguments." Just as Corax and Still concealed themselves, the command center doors slid open. 3 pirates entered. A Drachnid warrior, a Vex assassin, and a cybernetically enhanced Thoraxian. All were heavily armed. "The human guard," the Drachnid growled. "Surrender now, and we might let you live as a slave." Sarah's response was unexpected. She laughed. The sound made even the pirates pause. "You know what's funny?" she said, slowly raising her hands. "Everyone thinks humans are just strong or fast or tough. But we're something else too." "And what's that?" the Vex assassin hissed. "Clever." In one fluid motion, Sarah pulled something from her sleeve and threw it at the ceiling. The device burst, releasing a dense cloud of particles. From her hiding spot, Corax watched in fascination. The particles weren't harmful. They were reflecting the emergency lighting, creating countless moving shadows and light patterns. The pirates' advanced targeting systems, designed to track movement, were suddenly overwhelmed. "Another thing about humans," Sarah's voice came from somewhere in the chaos. "We learned early that sometimes the best way to fight isn't with strength, it's with science." The drachnid fired blindly, but Sarah was already moving. She'd memorized the room's layout during her security checks, while the pirates were disoriented. The sounds of precise strikes echoed through the chamber, followed by heavy thuds. When the particles settled, all three pirates were unconscious, expertly incapacitated with minimal force. Sarah stood in the center of the room, barely breathing hard. "Neural pressure points," she explained as Korax emerged from hiding. "All species have them. Part of our diplomatic security training includes studying xenobiology. Not to harm, to protect with minimal damage." Korax helped Sarah secure the pirates while Zitil worked on restoring full power. "You could have killed them easily," the ambassador observed. "Could have," Sarah agreed, checking the pirates' vital signs. "But humans have learned something important over our history. Just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. True strength isn't about how much damage you can inflict. It's about how much you can prevent." The station's main lights flickered back on, and Sarah's communicator crackled with activity. Federation ships had arrived, responding to the distress signal she'd managed to send. 9 pirates left, Sarah said, studying the station's security feeds. "They're regrouping in the main cargo bay." Her expression turned serious. "Now comes the hard part." "Harder than this?" Still asked incredulously. Sarah checked her equipment with methodical precision. "They'll be desperate now. Desperate enemies are dangerous. But they're about to learn another human trait. We're really good at setting traps." Korax realized she was witnessing something remarkable. Not just physical combat, but human strategic thinking in action. As Sarah began outlining her plan, the ambassador understood that the real show of human capabilities was just beginning. The cargo bay's massive doors loomed before them as Sarah put the final touches on her plan. She had turned the entire level into an elaborate trap, using nothing but the station's own systems and her knowledge of basic physics. "This is either brilliant or insane," Still muttered, watching Sarah redirect power flows through the station's maintenance panel. "Possibly both. Humans do have a reputation for being both," Sarah replied with a grin. "We call it thinking outside the box. When your species evolves on a death world, you learn to use everything around you as a tool." Korax studied the cargo bay schematics on the nearby screen. The remaining pirates had gathered there, using stolen cargo containers as makeshift fortifications. They were waiting for their reinforcements, not knowing that Federation ships had already blockaded the station. "Remember what I said about how humans used to hunt?" Sarah asked, making final adjustments to the environmental controls. "We didn't always use strength. Sometimes we used the environment itself as a weapon." She pressed a series of commands into her tablet. Throughout the cargo bay, subtle changes began. The artificial gravity started fluctuating in precise patterns. The temperature regulation systems created pockets of warm and cold air. Most importantly, the ventilation system began distributing a fine, invisible mist. "Water vapor?" Korax asked, her scales shifting in confusion. "With a hint of sedative," Sarah confirmed. "Perfectly safe, but when combined with the temperature changes." She checked the readings. "The pirates' thermal sensors will be useless. They won't be able to tell real threats from environmental ghosts." The station's security feeds showed the pirates growing increasingly agitated. Their advanced targeting systems, designed to work in normal conditions, were giving them conflicting readings. The changing gravity made their movements unpredictable, even to themselves. "Now for the real trick," Sarah said, pulling out her stunner. "Ambassador, remember how you wondered why humans insist on manual security checks? This is why. We don't just check for problems. We memorize every detail we might need later." She accessed the cargo bay's lighting controls. "In the next few minutes, those pirates are going to experience something humans know very well: the feeling of being prey instead of predator." The cargo bay lights began to flicker in a precise pattern. To the pirates, it seemed random. But Sarah was moving with the pattern, using the moments of darkness to change position. The fluctuating gravity helped her move in ways that seemed to defy physics. Through the security feeds, Carax and Still watched in amazement. The pirates' confusion turned to fear as they tried to track what seemed like multiple threats moving around them. Sarah had turned their own advantages against them. Their reliance on technology, their expectation of normal environmental conditions, their assumption that they were the hunters. "You're making them panic," Carax realized. Like how ancient human hunters would spook their prey into making mistakes. Exactly. Sarah's voice came through their communicators. "Humans aren't just persistent hunters. We're persistent learners. We take what worked in our past and adapt it to new situations." One by one, the pirates began breaking formation, their coordinated defense crumbling under the psychological pressure. Some tried to run, only to find themselves in pockets of heavier gravity. Others fired at shadows, wasting their ammunition on illusions created by the environmental changes. And through it all, Sarah moved like a ghost, systematically stunning the confused pirates. She wasn't just fighting them. She was demoralizing them, using their fear of humans against them. Carax watched the security feeds with new understanding. The human traits that the galaxy feared, their adaptability, their hunting instincts, their understanding of fear, were being used not for destruction, but for a calculated victory with minimal harm. But even as the last pirates fell, a new alert flashed on the screens. Something was wrong with the station's core systems, and Sarah's expression turned grim. The real challenge, it seemed, was yet to come. The station's warning sirens blared as Sarah raced through the corridors, Carax and Zill close behind. The pirates' final act of desperation had become clear. They had planted a quantum destabilizer in the station's power core. "They're trying to collapse the station's containment field." Still's voice trembled as they read the diagnostic screens. "If it fails, the entire station will implode." Sarah's face showed intense concentration as she studied the core's schematics. The quantum destabilizer was sophisticated, designed to trigger if anyone tried to disconnect it. The pirates had meant it as insurance, but now it had become a ticking time bomb. "The automated systems can't handle this," Carax said, her scales darkening with fear. "Even the Federation's best engineers would need hours to safely disarm it. We don't have that long." "Then it's a good thing humans are really good at impossible situations," Sarah replied, her voice steady. "You know what else we're good at? Understanding chaos." She approached the core's control panel, her movements deliberate. "Everyone thinks humans are just tough because we survived a death world. But we survived because we learned to understand complex systems, weather patterns, prey behavior, and later, quantum mechanics." The core room's displays showed cascading failures spreading through the station's systems. The destabilizer was creating a chain reaction that would soon be irreversible. "Humans have a saying," Sarah continued, her fingers flying over the controls. "Sometimes to fix something, you have to break it more first. Still, I need you to reroute emergency power to Section 7. Ambassador, please clear all personnel from the lower 3 levels." "What are you planning?" Carax asked, even as she began evacuation procedures. "The pirates designed this device to trigger if anyone tries to stop it. So we're not going to stop it, we're going to help it." Sarah's eyes reflected the pulsing emergency lights. Sometimes the best way to prevent an explosion is to cause a smaller one first. She began adjusting power flows, creating controlled fluctuations in the station's energy grid. The destabilizer responded exactly as she predicted, trying to compensate for the new instabilities. "Humans understand destruction better than most species," Sarah explained, monitoring the readings. "Not because we love it, but because we've spent millennia learning how to prevent it. Sometimes that means understanding exactly how something breaks." The core's warning signals reached a crescendo. Other species might have panicked, but Sarah remained focused, making microscopic adjustments to the power flow. She was creating a complex pattern of energy surges and drops, like a deadly dance with the destabilizer. "There," Sarah suddenly exclaimed. The destabilizer is trying to match the station's power fluctuations, but it can only adapt so fast. If we create the right pattern of chaos. The device began to overload, unable to keep up with the rapidly changing energy levels. But instead of triggering a catastrophic collapse, it burned itself out, overwhelmed by its own attempts to maintain control. The station's warnings fell silent. Emergency systems began to recover. Sarah slumped against the control panel, exhausted but smiling. How? Still asked, mandibles clicking in amazement. How did you know that would work? Because humans understand something fundamental about chaos, Sarah replied, checking the final system readings. It's not random. There are patterns in everything, even in destruction. We learned that surviving on Earth, every storm, every predator, every natural disaster taught us that lesson. Crax stared at her human guard with new understanding. The very traits that made humans dangerous, their understanding of chaos, their knowledge of destruction, had just saved thousands of lives. But as the station's systems stabilized, a final alert appeared. The pirates' mothership had arrived, ignoring the Federation's warnings. Sarah's expression hardened. They had survived the trap, but now they faced an enemy that wouldn't be defeated by clever tricks alone. The pirate mothership loomed outside Station Alpha's viewing window, its weapons charged and aimed directly at them. On the communication screen, the pirate captain, a scurred drachnid with cybernetic enhancements, smiled menacingly. "Surrender the ambassador and the treaty files," he growled, "or we'll destroy the entire station." Crax watched as Sarah stood calmly at the command console, showing none of the fear that gripped the other station personnel. Instead, the human wore an expression Crax had never seen before. Not quite a smile, not quite a frown, but something uniquely human. "You know," Sarah said, her voice surprisingly conversational, "there's something else everyone gets wrong about humans. They think our greatest strength is our ability to fight or survive." She began typing commands into the console, her movements unhurried. "But that's not it at all. Your stalling won't work," the pirate captain snarled. "Our shields are impenetrable. Our weapons are locked on target. Our greatest strength," Sarah continued as if he hadn't spoken, "is our ability to learn from everyone we meet. For instance, from the trillions, we learned about quantum harmonics." Her fingers danced across the controls. "From the Vex, we learned about shield modulation." Crax's scales flickered in realization as she watched Sarah's console screen. The human wasn't preparing for battle. She was reaching out to every allied ship in the sector, using protocols she had memorized during her security studies. "The pirates don't realize," Still whispered to Crax. "She's been planning for something like this since her first day here. All those security checks, all those system studies." And from humans, Sarah's voice grew stronger. "We learned that the best way to win isn't always through force. Sometimes it's about building connections." She pressed a final button. "It's about trust." Suddenly, space around the pirate ship lit up as dozens of ships dropped out of hyperspace. Federation vessels, trade ships, diplomatic cruisers. Every ally Crax had made during her time as ambassador, every connection Sarah had carefully noted and prepared for. "You see," Sarah explained to the now pale pirate captain, "while you were focused on breaking into the station, I was sending out encrypted distress calls, using communication protocols from every species that's ever visited here, calling in favors from every diplomat the ambassador has helped." The pirate ship found itself surrounded, outgunned, and outnumbered. Ships from a dozen different species, all responding to a human's call for help. "That's the real reason humans survived on our death world," Sarah said, finally allowing herself a small smile. "Not because we were strongest, but because we learned to work together, to build communities, to turn potential enemies into allies." The pirate captain's image disappeared as his ship powered down its weapons. Federation peacekeepers began boarding procedures. Later, as the station returned to normal operations, Crax found Sarah in the observation deck, watching the Allied ships prepare to depart. "You knew," the ambassador said. "From the very beginning, you knew the pirates might try something like this. That's why you spent so much time studying every species' protocols, building relationships with every visiting diplomat." Sarah nodded. "Humans don't just prepare for combat. We prepare for peace, for cooperation. Because in the end, that's what really keeps people safe." Still, who had followed them, clicked their mandibles thoughtfully. "Perhaps that is why the Federation chose a human as the ambassador's guard. Not for your strength, but for our ability to bring people together," Sarah finished, "to turn fear into understanding, to show that the very traits that make us seem dangerous can also make us the best protectors." Crax looked out at the departing ships, dozens of different species, all of whom had come to help because a human had asked them to trust her. She thought about her own journey from fearing humans to understanding them. "Well, Officer Chen," Crax said, her scales shimmering with warmth, "I believe you've done more than protect me. You've shown the galaxy a new way to see humanity." Sarah smiled, and this time there was nothing predatory about it at all. Just hope and the promise of a future where understanding would always triumph over fear.